For many years, Europe mainly relied on Russia will maintain homes and lights. Prior to 2022, roughly 40% of the European Union's use of natural gas originated directly from Russia. Nations such as Germany increased its pressure with over about 55% of its gas comes from the Russian. Why such a high reliance on pipelines? Russia provided a large supply of gas at prices that was financially sound for a long time. It appeared to be a stable, dependable bargain. However, in 2022, everything changed when Russia began an all-out invasion of the war in Ukraine, sent shockwaves through leaders in Europe are being forced to reconsider their energy strategy to aid Ukraine required severing relations with Russia, and the EU rolled out sanctions without wasting any time. And the bloc established a bold goal: give up using Russian fossil fuels entirely, naturally, that left Europe in 2027. Hurrying to bridge the energy deficit and quickly the first location, they went back to American liquefaction. LNG, or natural gas, became a lifeline by US exports to Europe have increased dramatically by more than half of US LNG exports in 2023 were traveling across the Atlantic to assist Europe avoided a serious energy crisis. This change was successful because America increased LG's output and Europe must diversify immediately. But the political winds were caught in the United States wasn't exactly at peace when Donald Trump was elected president. America First approach that rocked international trade and tariffs on imports, including European imports, became a tangible possibility and source of energy. Exports weren't halted by table that left EU leaders perplexed. What if the cost of petrol in the US increases? Unwilling to face that uncertainty, Europe continued to look for contingency plans. One nation that checked all the boxes, Canada. The EU and boxes already had a solid trading relationship because of a 2017 agreement that increased trade between them by 60%. Of that agreement made it possible for larger partnerships, particularly in energy. Canada has ample resources, either with enormous oil reserves and natural gas has the capacity to taking over as a reliable long-term energy source. Canada's partner for Europe and the European Union has always been friendly, respect and other shared values for the history of international law and easy diplomatic relations, which makes Canada a reliable and strong partner in Europe's eyes simultaneously. Canada has been reconsidering its energy management trade, particularly following some difficult moments spent with its largest client. The tensions in the US increased during the administration of Donald Trump when the administration proposed the notion of applying a 25% tariff to goods from Canada and taxing Canadian oil at a rate of 10% exports to the US that caused a significant wake-up. Canada is being called upon to look for new markets in order to avoid connected to Canada. Its neighbor to the south, Jonathan Wilkinson, the energy minister, attempted to reduce stress by advocating for an alliance between energy and critical minerals with the United States, still considering sending Europe, began to look for more energy. Incredibly alluring. Not only would it assist Canada economic wages were spread, but it would also support the EU's search for long-term, reliable energy sources that wasn't merely a conversation between the two sides, accelerating to improve their trade ties. One important figure in all of this, the overall economic and trade, CETA is a better name for the agreement because it began, at least in part, in 2017. It has been a trade that is revolutionary between Canada and the 2020 saw a sharp increase in EU goods trade. Between them were valuable $53.3 billion which by 2022 had soared to $77 billion EA, a 66% increase. And on paper, it's not just about the numbers. Products from Canada that were bound for Europe went from a record $22.2 billion in 2016 to $32.5 billion. 2021 will see a huge 46.4% increase on the Canadian side. EU imports also skyrocketed, hitting $67.5 billion in 2021 and beyond, 28.4% compared to earlier days. But there's one opportunity that Canada is closely monitoring: LNG, or liquefied natural gas, in Europe hurrying to escape the Russian energy. Canada recognizes a fantastic chance to transport LNG across the Atlantic directly. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, has made Canada is obviously not hurrying in. He heedlessly seeks a strong business case prior to taking significant actions in LG exports. Despite all of these changing dynamics, Canada has been working harder to reduce its dependence on the United States and disperse its international energy trade prior to. As we proceed, I'd like to ask you would you be interested in Canada joining America's United States as president. Donald Trump's recommendation into evade tariffs, or ought Donnie let Canada be, and share your thoughts with us. In the following comments section for decades, Canada has been largely dependent on the United as its primary trading partner. The States, particularly with regard to energy, regarding 80% of Canada's total sales are overseas, travel directly to the United States, and in 2023 only exports crude oil to its southern neighbour in a massive $143 billion, which represents 90% of Canada's overall sales of crude oil. But things became difficult when the US chose to take a tough stance in President Donald Trump in February 2025 authorized a new set of tariffs, pointing the flag at Canadian goods of national security as the rationale behind his. Not only did these new tariffs hurt, but they hit Canadian companies hard, increasing costs and making it more difficult for products from Canada to compete. In the US market that departed from Canada to crossroads, rather than relaxing, Canada intensified its efforts on a planet that had been endeavoring since 2018 to increase its trade outside of the US. The objective boost 50% of non-US exports by 2025 and the sight of the finish line. In addition to being on course, Canada could even exceed the target portion of this. Locking in trade deals has been the strategy, with nations such as Indonesia and Ecuador, but that's only the beginning. Energy has also been eyed by Iceberg Canada. Asia's ravenous markets, including China and Japan, is at the top of the list after finishing the expansion of the Trans Mountain pipeline. For this, TMX has now opened the door wide. Canadian oil offers a quicker, more straightforward path via the Pacific coast to Asia. As of October 2024, China was absorbing approximately 240,000 barrels of heavy Canadian daily sour crude, with an average of 150,000 barrels per day, more than the prior. Why the abrupt increase in China's seeking to alter its sources of energy, as well as the faster delivery times from Canada, gives Japan an advantage on the however. Is becoming an important energy collaborator, for experts from Canada forecast that Japan's lust for LNG, liquefied natural gas, could increase by more than 10%, reaching roughly 74 million metric tons by 2040, particularly if renewables projects slow down when they realize this. Chance that Canadian officials have been deep in negotiations with Japanese officials regarding upcoming LNG agreements in Alberta's Environment and Protection Minister Rebecca Schultz's areas of particularly outspoken about discovering new Japan, is highlighted in export markets as a primary focus, particularly in light of the imminent danger of more US tariffs. But Canada has huge aspirations to play a significant role in. The LG Game's most notable undertaking is the Quebec's first energy Sagan initiative, drifted in 2014 with a $7.2 billion price tag. The idea was to construct a huge LNG Port Sagan facility capable of exporting 11 million tons of natural gas that has been liquefied. What made this project special each year? It was intended to use hydroelectric power, making it among the first significant-scale LG facilities with lower carbon footprint to ensure everything functions. Additionally, a 782-kilometer pipeline was part of the project, extending from Ontario's northeast to the Sagan terminal, guaranteeing a consistent natural gas export flow. Back in Quebec's provincial government, July 2021 put the Energy SAG project on hold, claiming that the developers need to do more to demonstrate that the plan would be beneficial, lower greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. However, it wasn't over yet. In February 2022, the Impact Analysis Canadian agency weighed in with even harsher criticism. They came to the conclusion that project would be more detrimental than beneficial, increasing carbon emissions, which puts the already having trouble beluga whale population that is more vulnerable and adversely affecting First Nations people